Welcome to the Carter Center's Forum on Human Rights. My name's Josh Griffin, and I'll be moderating today's conversation. Today's conversation is the third in a series of roundtable conversations focused on Indigenous sovereignty in the United States and is produced in collaboration with Emory University's Masters in Development Practice program and instructor, Lori King. Lori teaches MDP 511, a MDP core course rooted in applied development practice. This conversation will explore what it means to work for and with people who have shared identities and collective memories of overcoming systemic oppression. This conversation will focus on the African-American experience of overcoming 400 years of brutality and how present-day descendants of slaves and their intentionally build institutions and programs for African Americans to continue to live into dignity, honor, and self-determination. Joining me today is Tarika Ganzi. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself and let them know who you are and what brings you to this conversation.
Thank you, Josh. I'm excited to be here. Thank you, Lori, for inviting me. For those of you who may be visually impaired, I'll just briefly describe myself. I'm wearing a navy blue dress with pink librarian glasses. I'm an African-American, brown-skinned African-American woman with my hair pulled back and blown out straight. I grew up in rural Mississippi, so I am a Southerner. I am a mother. I am a wife. I am a sister, and my four brothers would consider me a princess. I am also the executive director of the Southern Center for Human Rights. And my background and expertise has been in death penalty defense. And I've served in this at the Southern Center for about 18 years. At the Southern Center, we work for equality, dignity, and justice for people impacted by the criminal legal systems in the Deep South. And we work to end mass incarceration, the death penalty, criminalization of poverty, and racial injustice. And we do that in a number of ways, through litigation, through policy advocacy, through public education, through community engagement, and harnessing the power of community. And so I am delighted to be here for this discussion. I thank you, Josh, for participating with me.
No, definitely. I'm looking forward to it. So we're going to go ahead and show a video. And in this video, it talks about Black Wall Street. And we're going to come back and unpack what we saw, what we heard, and to see if we can create, what once was in the current context in 2022. So here we go.
Black Wall Street. By now, you've probably already heard of it and have an idea of what Black Wall Street was in America at the turn of the 19th century. HBO even made a fictional superhero series about it. If you aren't aware, here's a quick history lesson. After slaves were freed in 1863, Black Americans quickly proved to be faster learners than their slave masters thought they would be, even after intentionally being deprived of formally educating themselves for the previous 200 years. By 1920, one place in particular was widely known as the Mecca for Black excellence. Think Atlanta, Georgia today. That place was Tulsa, Oklahoma. There were Black millionaires across the country like Mary Ellen Pleasant and Madam C.J. Walker. But Tulsa essentially became the birthplace of African American entrepreneurship.
Black Wall Street is in many ways a misnomer, because what the business community in the Greenwood District, the Black community in Tulsa, was more like, would be a Black Main Street. These were mostly small businesses. So there were movie theaters and dance halls and barber shops and grocery stores and restaurants restaurants and service providers like doctors and lawyers and pharmacists and dentists, hotels, all manner of businesses that you might find on an American Main Street, concentrated in a segregated Black enclave in Tulsa. Black Wall Street, the Greenwood District, was also a community of necessity. There wouldn't have been a need for a separate Black economic island in Tulsa had it not been for Jim Crow segregation. So they created their own economy, in part, across the Frisco tracks, separated from downtown by those tracks.
Eventually, things quickly changed. By this time, the KKK was also quickly gaining prominence, particularly in the South, and of course, were not happy. After 2 days, the Mecca of Black entrepreneurship became the center of destruction. But most, unfortunately, did not see it that way.
The community was rebuilt after that to a substantial degree, peaking in the 1940s, early to mid-1940s, with well over 200 documented Black-owned and operated businesses. But then there was a second devastation. This was not a devastation affected through violence, but rather through policy.
Black people lost their fortunes and even family members and were never able to recover. Last summer, Forbes estimated that the Stratford Hotel alone, owned by O.W. Gurley, was worth about $75,000 at the time, which would be $2.5 million today. And that's just one building. Imagine how much money that was lost. This month, there will probably be plenty of media outlets re-educating us about the events that happened in Tulsa. But we gotta take things one step further, because the new Black Wall Street is here, and it's here to stay. Across the country, Black women have become the fastest growing group of entrepreneurs. In Tulsa today, the rebuilding has also begun. But the new Black Wall Street is no longer concentrated in one location. It's spread out across America. Forbes The Culture is taking a real look at businesses and entrepreneurs that make up this new era of Black Wall Street and defining what it is and what it means to be a part of an unprecedented number of Black movers and shakers in nearly every city in America.
So what comes to mind when you watch that? When, as you grew up, in Mississippi, did you hear about Black Wall Street? At the very end, you see videos of Jay-Z, P. Diddy, things of that nature. When I think of Black Wall Street in the current context, I don't think of, these moguls, these individuals that have somehow hit it rich. Think of more of, the grassroots level, small business owners within the city of Seattle that I currently live in. What are your thoughts after seeing that video?
I have so many thoughts. Let me see if I can parse them out. I think my first thought is how violent the white community can be when Black people reach a level of success that in some ways they feel threaten them. And we've seen this throughout history where it's pull yourselves up by your bootstraps and be successful and all of those things. And then when there's a backlash. We saw that when President Obama was elected.
Yeah.
The backlash was swift and harsh. We're seeing it now where we have these, white supremacists who are afraid that the white race is dying out, and they are reacting violently at the idea of interracial dating, et cetera. So Black folks end up being caught in between a couple different things. So we're blamed if we're not as successful as people might expect us to be after all those years of being enslaved and literally endangering our lives if we could try to read. So even if we're not moving fast enough, then we're blamed for that. But if we move too fast, if we get too much success,
Yeah.
then we're accosted too. So it feels like there's a no-win situation for us. So that's the first thing that comes up for me. And then, I think that I did, saw the moguls.
Yeah.
My first thought was, but that's not what we, that's not the goal necessarily. Certainly,
what would you say? Yeah, what would you say is the goal?
So for me, the goal would be that all of our community is thriving, and it doesn't mean that you need to be you'll be riding in a Bentley or all those things, but you'll have your needs met. Yeah. You will have the food that you need to sustain yourself. You'll have the medical care that you need to be well. You'll have the mental health care that you need. So a whole community for me is not so much the level of wealth that's accumulated in dollars. It's a level of wealth accumulated in supportive services and like a holistic view of what health is. And so, but I did appreciate the saying that the Black Wall Street is not a place anymore. Yeah. It's not like a singular place. And people, and I'll just say that the mentioning of the Atlanta as a model is a little bit challenging for me.
Tell me about that. For our folks that don't know about Atlanta, what's challenging about that?
I think when Atlanta gets a reputation, I think rightfully so, as sort of a Black Mecca, because there's so many Black people in Atlanta who are doing really, really well, who are holding positions of power. But in some ways, it papers over the high level of poverty that still exists in the Black community. So it's not a Mecca for every Black person. And so that's where some of I as somebody who lives in Atlanta and works in Atlanta, I want to hold up that as a banner. Yes, Black folks are doing it in Atlanta. Yeah. We are really moving and shaking and making waves. While at the same time, I don't want us to forget. I don't want it to be sort of papered over that there's so much work that we still need to do.
Absolutely.
To bring up the whole community, to really be on the mountain or whatever the phrase.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Do you see any organizations in the city, or does your organization work with the Black community to build programs and services for Black folks?
Yes. So there are places like the Black Mecca. I mean, I can't even name all of them.
Yeah.
But so our organization, we have been really intentional about being in community with the communities that we serve. And that is a shift for us we've been in existence for 46 years now. But this evolution maybe happened in the last 7.
Okay.
Because we are a nonprofit law firm, and what we've seen ourselves as, we file lawsuits, we go to court, we represent people, we do all of the things that you think that lawyers would do. But what we've also started doing is community engagement and figuring out how we can help build, not necessarily build power, but harness the power that's already in these communities. And so we've built up coalitions, the Justice Reform Partnership, Just Georgia, and we're working in another coalition, Communities Over Cages, to help stop the idea is to tear down, not necessarily tear down, but to close and repurpose the Atlanta City Jail. And so that's a fight that we're having in community with community people. I mean, people in the community, with people who are directly impacted in lots of ways, leading these fights. And so, yes, there's certainly people who are on the ground working. And I think one of the things that I feel good about is that we are in this moment where community is coming together again. I think, we look back at the civil rights movement, and one of the things that was really impressive to me was that you had the lawyers and you had the, doctors or whatever, but you also had the people who were working in folks' houses, right? Who were keeping folks' kids, and they were all bringing their talents to the struggle.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm seeing a little bit more of now, is that we're all like recognizing that as a lawyer, I don't have all the expertise.
Yeah.
So I need to lean on the folks who have this expertise that I don't have. And how do we put all of those things together to work to create change? And the other thing that, is that it doesn't happen overnight. And we have to remind ourselves of that when we feel like, right, we've been fighting this fight forever.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Do you think that I struggle a lot. Sometimes I'm like, progress hasn't happened fast enough in the way that I want it to happen. And it's like, I feel like, society still wants us to be present day slaves.
Yeah.
So do you feel like, with progress, where do you stand? Like, for our people, it's like, how is it fast enough? How do we not get upset when progress doesn't happen in the way that we want it to happen?
I don't know that it's possible to not get upset if you care.
I like that.
No, it's not happening fast enough. And in some ways, it feels like we're on a fast track back to 1950.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I have listened to my uncles, and they just, kind of joke about, like, I can't believe I used to go out and try to have a good time in Mississippi, all the while knowing that I could not make it home.
Yeah.
Because some police officer lynched me. They talked about it kind of like in a little bit of a joking kind of way, like, but also it's real. My mom talks about how she would walk to school because they couldn't get on the school buses, and how the white kids would spit at them.
Yeah.
And they talked about, like, in particular, how you couldn't trust law enforcement to protect you because they were part of the problem.
Yeah.
And it makes me sad that I feel similar about my own two boys.
Yeah.
And where I'm not excited about my 13-year-old in a few years learning how to drive.
Yeah.
I feel really scared about that. And not just because he's going to be a teenager driving, like that's something I could deal with. It's driving as a young Black man in America. And so, yes, like, I want to acknowledge that we are not where we used to be, right? I want us to understand. I personally don't feel like I'm going to get lynched if I go out to have a good time.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody's spitting on me to get on the bus.
Yeah.
But that's such a low bar, right? That's such a low bar in terms of progress. So when you talk about progress being slow, it definitely has been slow. We have made some progress, and I want to acknowledge that, because I want to acknowledge all the people who have worked to get us where we are today.
Absolutely.
So I don't want to diminish the work that they have done.
Yeah.
While at the same time understanding that sometimes when you progress at whatever speed, then there's a backlash that immediately follows. And so you feel like the progress that you made is being rolled, and you have to keep fighting, just really to stand your ground, not even progress. You're fighting to even get the little bit that you've already captured. And so, I don't think it's possible to not be upset about it. And I wonder how Black folks how we make it, really, because it's a stressful existence.
No, it is. I mean, it is. I mean, when you think about policing in general, it's an institution that was born out of slave catching, after the white folks lost the Civil War in the Deep South. A bunch of Tennessee Confederates peoples got together and created the Klan, right? Or policing. And, like, you see that still show up. So how can we, as African American, like, how do we exist, or what's the way forward for us when there's so many institutions that were born out of whiteness? Like, how do we build institutions deeply rooted in Blackness and our identities when, like, our culture, our language were stolen from us when we survived the Middle Passage? So how do we do what the white folks did to create these institutions that are rooted in whiteness? How do we build institutions, programming rooted in our existence and our Black excellence? Is that possible?
It's absolutely possible. I think the first thing that comes to mind when you say that is, we have to believe ourselves that we're enough. I think I don't remember. when these Black Wall Streets started to, I guess what I'm trying to say is we have been good about when we were allowed to purchase outside of the Black community, for example, and get our insurance outside of, we were good about like patronizing those businesses. They did not return the favor to us. And so our businesses collapsed because we were sharing our money outside of our community, but that the other communities weren't returning the favor and sharing their money back with us. And so I think one of the things we need to figure out is, do we believe that we are enough? How do we tear down this narrative that has been rooted in our society that Black people don't know as much? Our stuff is not as good. All of those things. I mean, these are things that have been pressed down and deep in the entire community, not in the Black community, right?
Yeah, I would say that's a byproduct of Black colonialism, right? You see that show up in international development, which I know I did the same program as the students that Lori's teaching, and like that same mindset still shows up, like the inferiority of like, here's this person that has all this knowledge, go to them. They're the knowledge keepers and seekers, and we will tell you how to move and how to navigate this world. And it's been liberating knowing that isn't my truth, right? That's not what I am going to claim for myself. My people have a rich and deep history that we've been able to create. We've been able to struggle and move forward. And to me, it's just like continuing to decolonize myself and to decolonize all of these institutions and to try to help. I can't help people, but to be able to live my life in a way for others to be able to see that they can decolonize themselves too if they choose to, because everything you were told in a sense is a lie and is rooted in the right experience, in my opinion. A lot of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we just have to be intentional. One, we have to acknowledge. So as I understand, we've been going through an internal process of trying to tear down anti-racist structures and practices and policies that we've sort of built up over time. And as a Black woman,
what does that look like as an organization? Like, how do you all do that? Is it collective? Is it everybody coming together? Like, what does that process look like?
It has been. I mean, our process has been collective because it needed to be. We needed people to own these changes that we're thinking about. We had to go through a reckoning, right? We needed to say out loud, here's how we've been harmed. Here's how all these places, not just harm Black people, but harm everybody in the organization, and sort of identify the structures that we could try to tear down together, but also like not forgetting to do the internal work. So me as a Black woman, it started for me as like remembering all the ways that I've been taught to think about professionalism in a certain way, to think about even communication, like prioritizing the written word versus the spoken word, those kinds of things, and how like that can be harmful for people who don't fit within those structures. But I've also been, it also prompted me to think about some other privileges that I've had that I didn't think about. And so like doing the internal work around who I'm trying to be and who we're individually trying to be. And it has not been easy. It has not been roses and candies and lollipops every day. And I think that's how it's supposed to be, right? Because if you're serious about a thing, then sometimes it's going to hurt. But what we do is we continue to strive. And so I think in terms of, I can't remember what your question is, was like, how do we do it? Is that we just keep trying. We keep building. We keep getting up every day in defiance of the people who don't want us to get up. We keep having hope when everything feels hopeless, because that's an act of, self-affirmation and an act of resistance. And so, we keep doing our part. And that's like a broad, like not very specific thing. But I mean,
Mhm.
I could tell you how I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep trying to lead this organization the best
Yeah.
way I can. I'm
Yeah.
going to keep trying to teach my children the
Mhm.
value of who they are and their
Yeah.
history. I'm going to
Yeah.
keep trying to lift up the people who are impacted most. And in my way, I'm going to be a part of a collective of people
Mm.
who are addressing these issues in their own individual ways.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. I hear the importance of this leaning in to discomfort and to really taking the time to know who you are and how you want to show up in these spaces. And if you want to get involved or not in building a more beloved community where we're all honored, and things of that nature. Now I'm gonna go ahead and show another video of how we can win. I think this video really encapsulates aspects of what we talked about. If it's challenging to watch, once again, I encourage people to lean in and ask yourself why. So we'll go ahead and watch this and then come back and talk about it.
Is that we must never forget that economics was the reason that Black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Do you understand that? That's what we came to do. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Now, if I right now decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money. I didn't allow you to have anything on the board. I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa. That was Rosewood. Those are places where we built Black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So that's 450 years. So for 400 rounds of Monopoly, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. So then for 50 years, you finally get a little bit and you're allowed to play. And every time that they don't like the way that you're playing, or that you're catching up, or that you're doing something to be self-sufficient, they burn your game. They burn your cards. They burn your Monopoly money. And then finally at the release and the onset of that, they allow you to play and they say, okay, now you catch up. Now at this point, the only way you're going to catch up in the game is if the person shares the wealth, correct? But what if every time you share the wealth, then there's psychological warfare against you to say, oh, you're an equal opportunity hire. So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every time that I played, if you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa and like they did in Rosewood, how can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the do I give a shit about burning the Football Hall of Fame, about burning the Target? You broke the contract when you killed us in the streets and didn't give up. You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own, by our bootstraps in Tulsa, and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract, so your Target, your Hall of Fame. As far as I'm concerned, they could burn this bitch to the ground. And it still wouldn't be enough. And they are lucky that what Black people are looking for is equality and not revenge.
You're muted.
Thank you. Gotta love technology. I was saying I'll never forget the summer of 2020. I happened to be in Atlanta and took part in a lot of organization, and it's just, you know, I loved Kimberly's passion and everything that she was saying. This the truth and this the reality of what it means to be Black and to have all this ancestral trauma within me in finding that way forward. But I constantly ask myself every day, like, how do we win? Here I am in my position. I've had these opportunities and things of that nature, but how do we win so that other people who look like me can have this same outcome? How do we win?
There are times when I cried myself to sleep.
Yeah.
Just the level of rage I felt.
Yeah.
Actual rage. Just wanted to go in my backyard and just scream.
Yeah.
But we win, I think. We win because we have to. This cannot be the end of the story for us.
Mm.
And we win because when we remind ourselves that there were hundreds of years when we weren't even allowed to read. And we're not there anymore. That's a win.
Yeah.
We win by counting and reminding ourselves of all the ways that we have progressed
Mm-hmm.
in society without discounting all the ways that we are still being crushed.
Mm-hmm.
We win by continuing to figure out ways to use our collective power, one, to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And not to hide, you know, being authentic in who we are. That's a victory.
Mm.
Me being able to show up at an event in my African printed dress,
Yeah.
that's a victory.
Absolutely.
It's a victory that I feel so good about who I am that I don't need to figure out how to fit into somebody else's model about who I should be. It's a victory when I walk in the room with whoever else, CEOs, all of these things, and not feel like an imposter.
Mm.
Because I believe I'm supposed to be there.
Mm.
We win by just building on the strength of the people who came before us. Like I think about my grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying not to be emotional.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, it's real.
My grandmother and her great aunt and my great aunt worked as maids all their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes in Mississippi, walking miles and dirt roads with laundry on their back. But they were the first African Americans to register to vote in Liberty, Mississippi. And I think about them and I'm inspired by them because they did that, not because they thought somebody was going to cheer for them.
Mm.
They did that because they believed that their job didn't give them their value. They believed that there was something inherent in them that made them worthy of the same rights as everybody else. And they decided that they would risk their lives to obtain those rights. And so I believe we win by focusing on that and by trying to emulate that in everything that we're doing today. Because I think, you know, sometimes I get scared. Sometimes I think, man, if I say this, how is that going to impact folks? You know, all of those things. And then I remember that my grandmother could have died that night. She could have been killed and nobody would have cared but her people.
Mm.
Nothing would have happened.
Yeah.
And then I think, well, if she could do that, then I obviously can do all of these other things. And so that's how we win, I think. You know, I absolutely resonate with everything Kimberly said. I resonate so strongly with like the feeling of like can you just get your knee off my neck? Because if you did, I could just fly. I could fly. And so how we win is that we own that rage, we own that hurt, and we try to use it to fuel the work that is necessary for us to do to continue to challenge these systems.
It's well said. It's beautiful. I couldn't agree more. As you're talking about your grandmother, thought about my father who grew up illiterate most of his life and never really had the opportunity to go to school. And one of the proudest moments of my life is when I saw him. He would go to something called Literacy Source Academy, which is an organization here in Seattle that works with adult learners. And so to hear the inner child come out and to hear him read poems to me, and to know like that's where I get my creativity was everything. And I'll never forget a few years back, he was at Seattle Pacific University, and there was like a benefit breakfast to try to raise funds for the organization. And my dad got up on stage to read a speech, and my dad's a very shy individual. And so part of me was ready to get up there on stage and to read the speech for him, but he did it in front of a room of 400 people, a man from Hampton, Virginia, that was told he isn't going to be able to go to school, got up there, and I don't know what he said, but I'll never forget the quote. At 70 years old, he told an audience, "For me, school is like a job. I'm not ready to retire." So when my life gets hard, I think of him. And I think of where I'm at and what I'm doing, and the fact that he was deprived of an education. And here I am, a product of being able to have him as a father to encourage me to go to school and to have these degrees and to be in my position and to know, like you were saying, like that is a win. And then pouring into others to know that when life gets hard and I'm just like, what am I doing? And I get deeply frustrated. Everything I'm doing is for the next 7 generations. A friend of mine really instilled that in me. And so it's for our ancestors, right? It's for the people that I haven't met yet so that they don't have to struggle as much as my father, your grandmother, and our ancestors, so that we can continue to win and find victories every single day. Yeah. It's challenging though sometimes. It really is. It's hard. What are your thoughts on Truth and Reconciliation commissions? Do you think that might be needed, or there's space for that to be had at like the federal level, state level, city level?
I think yes.
No.
I mean, I think the answer is yes. I think the problem is that people don't want to hear the truth. They don't want to own up to the truth, and so, and that comes from a place of privilege where you don't have to. You haven't been. Well, I'm trying to think of how to say this. Like, it's very privileged. Let me just, as an example,
Yeah.
It would be very privileged of me to say, we need to tear down the criminal legal system and start over. And so what we're going to do right now is we're going to stop working to help the people who are currently incarcerated, because that's not where we need to be putting our energy. That's a privileged space for me to come from, because I'm not incarcerated, right?
Yeah.
And so when I think about truth telling, it also brings up for me that there are people who have the power not to listen. Who have the power to sort of disengage from it. Who have the power to undermine it. I don't get to not know the truth, right?
Yeah.
I don't, because I have to live it every day, and I have to live the consequences of it. But some people can live their whole lives and not have to address any of these issues, not personally.
Yeah.
So my answer is yes, this is all needed, because there are going to be people who have the power to hear and understand and do something about it, who will benefit from this. While I also know that not everybody is going to, not everybody's going to listen. Not everybody's going to want to hear it. Not everybody, and there are going to be people who put up roadblocks to stop the conversation. And so we, as a community, have to be stronger than the opposition in terms of we have to want the truth to come out much more than folks want to keep it hidden.
How do we do that? What's the way forward? How is it possible to establish these? Do we just push? I know, HR 40 still sits in the House of Representatives. It's been brought up, each Congress, and it hasn't passed. How do we establish a truth and reconciliation on the effects and impacts of slavery in impacting present day African Americans?
We vote, we run for office, because part of the problem is that sometimes I used to get so frustrated when we were like, when you think about having to go to certain people and beg for them to listen. And for me, I keep wanting to figure out a way to be in those positions. I personally don't want to be a politician, but I want our community to stop, to continue to really think about how do we sit in these positions of power that make the decisions around this. And until that time, though, until we can get there, then how do we make our voices so big and so strong that they cannot be denied? And I think one of the ways we've been trying to do that on any issue is to drill down on meeting people where they are in terms of the issue, right? So the way I come to a certain issue might not be the way that you come to it. For me, like death penalty is just wrong.
Yeah.
But there are going to be people who believe that thing either for religious reasons, but there are people who are like, I'm not moved by your Jesus or whoever else.
Yeah.
Tell me something that's going to help me get there from where I stand.
Okay.
And so when we're trying to like push a thing, we need to remember that we need to speak to people in the language that they're able to hear.
Absolutely.
My sort of what moves me about the issue might be totally different than what somebody else moves. And so we probably need to start asking some questions like, what is your resistance to this? How could we persuade you? All of these questions, we need to start asking some questions to get at some of the root of the resistance, so that we know how to frame our strategies for challenging those. But we also just need to not give up, right?
Yes,
Sometimes things just take a while, and it's very, very frustrating.
Absolutely.
But we cannot get discouraged that this is not happening overnight, because what will end up, what I hope will happen is that one of these days it is going to happen, and hopefully sooner rather than later, and we're going to look back and just be bask in the glory of the thing, not necessarily remembering or complaining about all what it took to get there.
Absolutely. No, I definitely agree. In preparation for this conversation, I was like kind of looking up, different speeches you gave, and like there's a really good statement that you gave, and I love for you to elaborate on it. But how do we get free of racial injustice?
That's a big question.
It is. I think it's
If I had the answer, we'd be done with this. But I think so. I mean, I think we're doing our part in terms of trying to get. I'm sorry, my thing.
Oh, it's all right. No worry.
we're trying to eliminate racial injustice related to the criminal legal system. The one of the things that comes to mind for me is when we were doing our strategic plan, we were thinking about our tagline, and we came up with equality, dignity, justice.
Mhm.
And there was some conversation about why wouldn't equality be equity? Why wouldn't we say equity instead of equality? And where we landed is because we can't even get into equity
Mhm.
if Black folks are not seen as equally human as other people, right? Like we're still fighting for the baseline of when we think about how human rights and human dignity. Um, so how do we get free of racial injustice? It's got to be a multi-pronged approach. There's not going to be like a silver bullet, as they say. There's not going to be some sort of, I'm going to click my heels 3 times and it's going to all of a sudden go away.
Yeah,
It's because racial injustice is embedded in all of our systems. When you think about the way we've been treated, I won't even get into the way I've been treated and giving birth to my children, in medical care and all of the things. And so I think we get free by each of us deciding that we have a role to play.
Yeah.
And that work is internal as well as external. So internal, I need to figure out how to tear down all of the stuff that I've been told about, all of the racial stereotypes, all of the things that I've sort of grown up with, intentionally or unintentional. So doing the internal work myself, but also figuring out how I can contribute externally to helping others get to a place where racial injustice is eradicated. And it's just everywhere. So it takes media education, right? We need to shift the narrative.
Yeah.
If everything that you see on TV about Black folks is that they deal drugs and shoot people, then that's what you believe. And so how do we shift these narratives and start telling full stories about the humanity of people of color?
Yeah.
So I don't have a single answer, right?
I don't think there is one. Yeah.
Is that we need to commit to it.
Yeah. I like that.
We need to decide that this is a thing that we want to end, and then we'll figure out how to do it.
I like that. What would you say to people who aren't Black, right? That aren't minoritized, that want to engage in allyship and do their part in ending racial injustice or for racial injustice? Like, how can they get involved? What would you say their role is? Is that to determine upon themselves? Is it to work with communities, to give to organizations, to engage in mentorship? What are your thoughts?
I think there's just so many ways to be involved. I think the first thing is to do the internal work first. I mean, like, so much of our identity is tied up into these images that we made for ourselves, right? And so sometimes it's really hard, particularly if you're a person who has built your life sort of wanting to help communities. And then when a person comes to you and says, well, that thing that you did or that way that you said that thing actually is a little bit anti-Black, then that hurts. Like, that gets to the ego. And so I think one of the things that we can do, or folks who are not people of color can do, is to take down your ego just a little bit and be open, one, to correction, two, but like to hearing these experiences and just sitting with them, right? Like, sometimes I don't need your help. I just need you to hear me. I need you to understand, like, I need you to just sit with what I'm sharing with you, but also understand that I can't be your, like, it's not my job necessarily to teach you. I'm doing this. I'm doing the education that I am trying to do with you is because I care about you, first of all, because I wouldn't waste my time and energy.
Absolutely.
This is hard work. This is heart work for me. So if I am willing to sit down with you and help you explain, it's because I care about you enough that I want you to be better, to have better interactions, and to be in your community better. But also, I think it takes a little bit of courage to be in spaces where there probably not people of color in the room.
Yeah.
And when your friend or your mama or your somebody loved one says a thing that you know is just not right, having the courage to say, and here's why this is wrong. Absolutely. Right? That courage in those moments can make a huge difference. And it might not make you any more friends, like it might hurt somebody's feelings. But it will give you a sense for, you know what, I am standing on the things that I say I value, and Absolutely. I am proving it in the small moments, because it's the small moments that count. It doesn't matter that you go on a huge stage and say whatever your belief is.
Exactly.
It matters if you can be true to that in situations that are intimate, and that will cause maybe some of your people, family members, people that you love, to think twice about some of the things that they are saying and are doing. And then on a bigger scale, invest in organizations that are trying to do this work. Volunteer to help do some of the work. Help schools. We didn't talk about education yet. I don't know if we have time to do that. But really, like, invest in your community in ways that try to acknowledge the ways that resources have been drained from other communities. Invest in those communities so that you can to try to undo some of that harm, but also hold your elected officials accountable. Let them know that you care about this, so they should care about this. And if they don't care about it, then there will be problems in terms of whether or not they get to hold that position for any longer period of time. I think we need to do a better job of saying, I care out loud. Yes. Because when we say I care out loud, then the people who are holding positions of power have to hear that. And sometimes it does make a difference. It shouldn't, but sometimes it does make a difference when there are doctors who show up and say, or there are business people who show up and say, not in my name. And so use your position, use whatever privilege you have to raise your voice around these issues. But I think I'll just end with this one caution.
No, you're good.
But don't be so like, sometimes we can learn a new thing and then we get all out of discombobulated. We start, everybody's bad because I learned this thing in last week and y'all don't know it yet. So I would say, like, have some grace a little bit, have a little bit of grace around the fact that we're all learning.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to be better. And yes, you might learn a new thing and it's really important to you right now. And you might be judging people who don't know it just yet. But remind yourself that you just learned it last week. Yeah. And so give people the space to take a week or two to figure it out too. So I want us to, like, as we're like calling a thing out, also figure out how to have grace around allowing people to learn it, absorb it, and move better once they are able to do that.
Yeah, that's all great advice, and I hope you all took notes and really to be able to look within yourself to see how you can move forward. I want to kind of end out. We got about 6 minutes left. I want to show a poem. It's an intense poem, but I think it speaks to the reality of oppression and what oppression can do to various societies and urban complexes. So this is a poem called Lost Count. It's maybe 10 years old, but still very relevant.
Lost Count. That poem was actually the one that meant the most to the entire team, because Chicago still has a very horrible epidemic of kids killing kids.
Raphael Johnson, 17, Baker High School, died November 9th, 2006. Craig McComb, 19.
Will they ever call your death beautiful? Your life a sacrifice?
Will the meeting of blood
And will it ever be called romantic? A love story to be jealous of.
Christian Lamont.
Chris,
17.
I remember you in Guatemalan green matching your flag on your Independence Day.
Charlene Henderson.
Your hair was a black puff of curl and
Anderson High
confidence.
School. That's
In
it.
homeroom, you always had homies in the hallway waiting for you. We're still waiting. I couldn't sleep for a week when you washed up waterlogged in the Calumet River, puffed and purple like violets before bloom.
Eduardo Pena.
Eddie, you were the first to say hi to me. First day of school when I stepped in with Bugle Boy jeans and a hot top fade and I saw you. Possibly the coolest dude to ever grace elementary. September 22nd, 2006, 8th period. We really need to hang out. Yeah, that'll be cool. I'll see you later, D. September 22nd, 2006, 8:30 p.m., maybe a little later than I thought, when your path ended on Vincent's Road, run down by bad luck and a police officer. Lives like these shouldn't be shortened, sentence fragments of a future. And in the 14 days it took us to write this, we've had to add more names to this list. Because in this city, before we blossom, we must weather storms unforecast, because every intersection can become Virginia Tech.
So excuse me if the news be missing my emotions. See, being brown in Bigger Thomas's town makes you endangered. And in the past 2 years, I've seen over 60 native sons set in the graves.
September 16.
I guess this is the part where poets produce plans and we don't have any. In Chicago, anyone under age 20 is a target.
And I don't know how to do more than be afraid
That an age allowing me to be on this stage might have me murdered by Monday. I'm 18. I play pickup basketball games with ghosts.
Is there a reason I'm making it out of a community that has martyred young men I might be mistaken for? I
Christian Lamont.
don't
Eduardo Pena.
know. Will they ever call your death beautiful? Your life a sacrifice? A love story to be jealous of? How many deaths will it take before this is considered genocide?
Fernando Monteroso. 18. Redirections High School. Died.
You can't silo the various types of oppression that impacts the descendants of slaves. It shows up across the board. Black children go into school in neighborhoods where there aren't as great opportunities, educational systems, having to deal with the gun violence, having guns put in place by external forces so that we kill each other off. It's challenging to find a way forward. But from this conversation, listening to you, I just hear the importance of taking it upon myself as an individual to do all that I can to ensure that we continue forward, that we move beyond this ancestral trauma. I embrace it and I move forward, and I find ways to be able to build programs that are rooted in who I am, who my people are, so that these types of poems and these types of stories don't continue. What were your thoughts as you heard that?
I just, it's heartbreaking. And I think I want to stand on what you just said, that we're going to do our part so that these stories don't continue. Absolutely. So that we protect our people. Absolutely. And that people can hope for a brighter future and not feel like it's just pie in the sky. Absolutely. That it is real and achievable because everybody in their community wants that for them.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Got about a minute left. How can our audience support you, your work, organization? What's the best way for people to get involved?
They can visit our website at www.s as in Southern, C as in Center, H as in Human, R as in Rights.org. And you can learn more about what we do and how to sign up for our email and all of those things. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and just look forward to continue to build community. Have a good rest of your day, everybody. Thank you.